All right, it is 7:00. Please rise to the pledge of allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's start with attendance. David, do you have any questions on attendance? Next up is the agenda approval. Any additions, corrections to the board agenda?
I had a couple corrections. First one is in the consent agenda, letter I. I just removed the name as the member has resigned since I had typed the agenda, so I took that name off. It's highlighted and crossed off. And then it didn't make it into the packets for the board, but it's available electronically, or it's not available in the packets for the public. I redid our district budget today, and it was based on our policy 701, which that policy says the school board shall review the projected revenues and expenditures for the school district for the next fiscal year and make such adjustments in the expenditure budget as necessary to carry out the education program within the revenues projected. So basically what that means is our expenses should match our revenue or be under our revenue. And what I had put out on Friday did not have that, so I redid our budget today to make sure our expenditures are under our projected revenue. And what I had to do that today was I reduced the budget by 2 additional general education teachers, 1 special education position, and then 3 support staff positions. But the proposed budget, which when we get to, will be highlighted with those changes. The proposed budget that I'm making tonight does have the expenditures under our projected revenue.
All right, so then I would like to make an addition. I would like to make a motion to add rehiring of staff with fund balance to the end of the agenda.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? No discussion. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Now we need to go back and approve the amended agenda. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion. A second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next up is rules for open forum. There are 3 minutes per speaker. Open forum shall not take more than 15 minutes. No complaints about individual staff members, about students, or about other persons are permitted. All presenters will conduct their business in a manner that meets community standards for decorum. The board will not take action on items presented in an open forum. Did anybody sign up to speak? Does anybody wish to speak? All right, then we will move along. Next up is the consent agenda. Does anybody need anything pulled or have further discussion regarding the consent agenda? Not, I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move that.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next up are the bills. If you have any questions on the bills, please state the page number and the bill number. Does anybody have any questions regarding the bills? If there are no questions on the bills, I'm looking for a motion to pay the bills.
I'll move that. I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next up is the superintendent's report. Mr. Masterson.
I just have a short report. Number 2 if board members haven't yet, you can see the board compensation list that we have. So if you haven't turned in your compensation for this fiscal year, we ask that you do that before the end of the month. And I attached a claim form to this if you haven't turned those in yet. So if you haven't put in those compensation requests, those claim forms, please do so before the end of June. And then just an update, we've talked about this, but for at least 15 years, that's as far back as I could find, we've had an outside company that offers student insurance to families. It doesn't cost the district anything. Families can elect to take it. We plan to do that again going forward for next year. We don't receive kickbacks from this company. This company just provides additional insurance for students. A lot of times it can be with our athletics and things like that where people may use that. But we do plan to offer that again to our families for next year. Again, it has no cost or doesn't come out of our budget at all. It's just from this company. It's another offering that we can provide our families. I think that's all I had in my report this month.
Does anybody have any questions? for
Yeah,
Mr.
can I make
Wilson?
a public statement or whatever, just acknowledging, I came up with just 5 people, probably more, but Brian, Kim, Mandy, Katie, and Heather for a very successful graduation ceremony under very stressful circumstances. I think it could be ended up as more as normal as we could ever get it under the circumstances. So I'd like to publicly thank those people.
Thank you, Leo.
Thank you.
If there are no questions, then I will move on to high school principal reports.
Good evening. First up, just wanted to share some graduation information. This year we had 72 graduates. 57 were from the high school, 8 from Empower. We had 3 foreign exchange students. We have 4 students that are moving to the transition program next year, and then 3 students that did not graduate. So that was really exciting to have those numbers. Number 2 is just some information that I received from Pine Technical and Community College about enrollments and credits, and I thought it was interesting to share with the board the number of credits earned from over the last 3 years and how much it has increased. So this past year we had 521 college credits earned, and you can see how it's broken down based on concurrent enrollment. So that's where students are at the high school taking it from one of our teachers, but they also earn high school and college credit. Then our ITV numbers, and then traditional PSEO numbers. And then that second column is the number of students. So the first column is the number of credits earned, and then the second column is the number of students. So just some information to share with you on where we're at there. Number 3 is just summer school information that starts next week. The dates 9th through 12th, we'll do credit recovery. Those letters were mailed out last week, so any students that need to earn credits, Miss Katie Hartle sent out letters to families, so they should get those in the mail so they know what classes, and that those students are automatically enrolled in Ingenuity to work on credit recovery. Next week, 7th and 8th graders, we have a couple different classes set up with math, some study skills, and some other type of classes for 7th and 8th graders. And there's the link to registration and to indicate if you need transportation. Number 4 is handbook. I'm going to continue to work on handbooks at the end of this month, wanting to wait and meet with the new principal and talk about any changes that he would like to see. So I'll be working on those and hopefully have those for you in July. Next year, school board members, I had 1 student say Nyla Williams at the end of the school year, so hopefully we'll find 1 more before September. And then the last is just some summer dates. So that's it for me.
Does anybody have any questions? I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
Looking at our traditional PSEO, just like the number of students, we had 24 this year and 10 last year.
Mm-hmm.
So do we ever survey the students as to why they choose PSEO instead of I mean, I can see some classes, but would that be traditional PSEO? That is, you're not in the high school.
Correct. So I don't know if have you ever surveyed? I think a lot of it depends on what we offer. And so some of the classes, we just don't have that, our concurrent enrollment classes or the ITB classes, we just don't have the classes that they want to take. So that's why they would take a traditional PSEO type classes, but we could definitely look
It
into
just
that.
seems like such a high jump in a year.
Mm-hmm.
It would be interesting to know if they would first fill a survey out.
Yeah.
And then, what they would say.
Yeah, I
And
can
my
work on
other
that.
question was, for fails for fourth quarter that are coming back for summer school, did we have a higher jump this year than past years? Or?
I guess I don't know the exact comparison. I can work on that during the meeting and look and get back to you. I know the fail list is quite a bit this year.
Okay, so they either fail the class and have to retake it then in the fall or whatever to graduate, or they take the credit recoveries during the 2 weeks of summer school.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and they can continue to work if they don't finish it during summer school. They can continue to work on it throughout the summer.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
All right, are there any other questions for Ms. Henke? Thank you. Next up is elementary principal, Mrs. Keller.
Well, good evening. I, like Kim, will be bringing my handbooks forward in August. Just really trying to look at solidifying some procedures, especially for the behavior component. I want to make sure that we're being really precise when we're looking at some of those issues that we're having, and kind of how we're handling that, as well as really working with the families to solve or to problem solve, I guess, a little bit of the issues that we may be having. Master scheduling is done. We did build in a 40 to a 50-minute wind block again this year. At the lower levels, we will be focusing on the ELA component, and then touching on math as needed or as we can. We know that their reading has such an impact on their math ability if they have to be reading story problems. We are starting at 8:30 again versus 8:20 in Hinckley. We had a lot of kids who struggled getting there at 8:20 and really missed out on too much education or too much of that instructional time. So we're pushing that start time back 10 minutes again, and just starting breakfast a little bit later. No openings up here at Finlayson. We do have one sped opening at Hinckley Elementary and then about 4 para positions. So we'll be looking for those, the para positions closer to the end of the summer. You can see my goals there throughout the summer. Already started working on some of that. We are bringing Bridges on for math. So we have some people who are willing to do some additional training, and have some additional supports for everyone else in the building. So looking forward to that. You can see our reward days that we did quarterly. I guess what's fun about that is we had about 70% of our kids, no less than 70% of our kids who participated in those reward days. So if they got a referral, if they had too many absences or tardies, then they just didn't get a partake. And none of that is a cost to us. That's all paid for through our fundraising. Summer school, we got about 58. Take that back, after a couple phone calls today, we have 60 kids who will be joining us in the gen ed setting. And we have about 32 kids who receive special ed services who will be working on some of their IEP goals during summer school. Last year we were able to host a pre-K summer school, and this year there was no grant for that. So unfortunately that is not, we're not able to do that, but, and the art show, I guess if you attended the spring program at all down in Hinckley, Mr. Glowacki brought his art show over to, the program, and it was really well received. The one component that we're missing there is to have the kids like showcasing their art. So we'll continue to work on that, but I think it was a really great way to celebrate the achievements that our kids had made, and parents were able to see it. So, a snapshot of our testing data there. You can see the proficiency at grade level. This is AFAST. This is not MCA, that's still embargoed, but we had a lot of growth across the board. Again, our proficiency numbers aren't necessarily where we want them, but we do celebrate the growth that our kids are making. And we continue to work on that. We had a sixth grade graduation. We opened it up to families this year. We did it over at the Fine Arts Center. I thought it was really, really well received. It's a big stepping stone, I guess, for our kids to as they graduate from our elementary into our high school, and it was really fun to celebrate them. My next number there is an action item. So Bridget Fritz has worked with the Special Olympics of Minnesota, as well as our Dave teacher, Sam Favor, to try and bring on some Special Olympics, some other opportunities for some of our kids. She's got a grant for the next 2 years. First year is fully covered. Second year will be a 50-50 partnership. And then with some, a plan that she's putting forward to hopefully sustain it on her own without having any district costs, but looking forward to providing more opportunities for them. Sounds like it's gonna start out pretty small with just maybe bowling, but then growing from there. Looking for thoughts or feedback, or is this something you want us to pursue?
I think it's a great opportunity for the kids.
I agree.
Okay. So do we need a motion to?
So Bonnie is looking for a motion to approve the proposal for Special Olympics.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you very much. I know Bridget will be excited to get that rolling. And then the last is just a shout out to you guys and thank you for the support throughout the school year. Lots of successes to celebrate, and it was a great year, so thank you.
All right, thank you, Bonnie. Does anybody have any questions for Bonnie overall? Not? We're going to go on to board committees. Does anybody wish to present from their committee? We had commodities and we'll get to it, so that's fine. We'll move on if nobody wishes to present. Next is communications. I believe there's none. All right, then next up is our current budget.
And we'll talk, I'll talk a little bit more about this when we get to our proposed budget, but happy to report that as of now, June 1st is 91% of the school year complete. And we've spent about 85% of our projected budget. Again, those aren't perfect indicators of how we're doing with our budget, but we always want to be under where we are during the fiscal year, and usually we're under 1 or 2%. So I'm happy that we're at 91% of the school year, but only have spent 85% of our budget. The end of the year does come with some additional costs as we wrap some things up, but a lot of them have been budgeted for. So I'm very hopeful that our budget's going to come in under budget as we complete the end of the month. And then I'll talk more about budget when we get to our proposed budget.
All right, does anybody have any questions regarding our current year budget? Then we're gonna move on to policy reapproval. We have two policies. The first one is policy 502, search of student lockers, personal possessions, and student persons. And the second one is, 531, the Pledge of Allegiance. Are there any questions regarding the two policies presented? I'm looking for a motion to accept the two policies. There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next up is terminology and acronyms. Back up, next item is J Pride. Does anybody wish to add anything to J Pride? No?
I'd like to say all 5 of them are very amazing, but I'd like to point out number 5, Bonnie Skeller earned an award from SCRED, the Go Together Award. She was nominated for our school district. Again, all 5 of these in Jaguar Pride are awesome, but since Bonnie's here in the room, wanted to recognize Bonnie for earning her award from SCRED this spring.
Nice job.
Thanks.
All right, now we'll move on to terminology and acronyms.
So I shared and to try to update this yearly for you all. Just a lot of times you'll hear the 2 principals or myself use a lot of these acronyms or terminologies. So just wanted to keep some of them in front of the school board. Are there questions as you've read through that? There's not a lot of changes from when I shared this last year, but these were a lot of common things that you might hear us say, trying to give you what they mean. And what they are, but anything I can clarify in these terms and acronyms that I shared with you all.
Does anybody have any questions? And we will move on to bid committee recommendation.
Like Jody said, the bid committee met, and we had 4 areas where we received bids for bakery, garbage, diesel, and dairy. For the bakery, for all the bids, we only had 1 vendor make a bid. For bakery, we had our current vendor, Panagold, bid. They presented a total bid of $11,148.50. This is up. I think it was about 7 or 8%, if I remember my math correctly. Last year, we had approved Panagold for $10,401. Would recommend continuing with Panagold. Garbage, we had 1 bid presented, Matt Sanitation, who is also our current vendor, presented a bid of $12,776.40. This is up. Matt had kept his rates pretty stable if not perfectly stable, for the last 5-6 years. So to see a little increase, we haven't seen one in a while, but it is an increase of just under $700. But our custodial staff has high satisfaction with Matt's. We had 1 bid for diesel from Kurtz, where they give us a 5 cent per gallon discount by using the number of gallons that we use. Get diesel at the pump price, unleaded at the pump price. Would recommend continuing with that. And then dairy, we had our current milk bidder, Prairie Farm. If the board remembers last year, that was a significant increase from our previous vendor. It is our current vendor. They did come down in price to $68,916. They were at $71,786. But would recommend staying with all those companies. And then just a reminder that we do bid for other things. The commodities team doesn't really talk about all these, but Jill Carlier, who does most of our ordering for the district, does bid and seek the lowest cost on things that the teachers and staff budget for, and then we do snowplow bids as we get closer to the fall. But recommending approval of those 4 bids.
Does anybody have any questions regarding the 4 bids? If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve bids for garbage, diesel, dairy, and bakery.
I'll move that.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next up, we are at long-term facilities maintenance.
So we'll do 2 of these tonight. The first one is for the Hinckley-Finlayson School District. The second one, which we'll get to, will be for SCRED. But we are required, since about 2012, to do a 10-year facilities plan. What the state wants to see is that we're planning ahead for some of the things that could come up with our air quality, with roofing, with asbestos removal, things like that. So we do the best we can projecting forward. The state every year wants to see a 10-year plan. We do have the option to change this every year. Working with Resource Training and Solution, a lot of these initial costs in category 1 for physical hazards, other hazardous materials, health and safety, asbestos removal, etc., are things that Resource Training and Solutions helps us with. They help both Keith and I kind of come up with some costs as they help look at our roofing and when we have to have our lead water testing, when we have to test our fire extinguishers, when we have to test fire alarms. That's where some of this funding goes. As you scroll down, some of the categories where you'll see I'll have a lot of zeros don't apply to us. We don't have any health and safety projects currently planned that cost $100,000 or more. So that's why you'll see a lot of zeros in that category. We don't have any remodeling planned for a pre-kindergarten space. We don't have any bathroom remodeling plans. After that, down in category 5 is where we kind of start planning for our building and kind of what kind of things we may need. And this is it's a reserved fund, it's a restricted fund balance, sorry, that we have in addition to our unrestricted fund balance. If you remember last year, we used a lot of this revenue to help with some roofing costs. It helps us plan, kind of save some money in our restricted fund balance for things that could come up, from plumbing to roofs to, we've talked about a high school gym. And you can see as we're projecting, if you go down to the fund balance section, if things don't come up, and certainly things come up that we don't plan during the year, but we are trying to build that fund balance. One of the immediate things we've talked about is we need to get a new gym floor. So we've put some money aside to help hopefully do that, as long as everything goes as planned. But this is, like I said, kind of Keith and my plan to kind of keep our facilities up to date for the next 10 years. And again, it can change. We can change it next year if we need to, but the state requires us to do this by July every year.
Does anybody have any questions about the LTFM plan that has been presented? If there are no questions, then I'm looking for a motion to accept the LTFM plan.
I'll make the motion.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 0. Next up is the SCRED LTFM.
So similarly, SCRED needs to do an LTFM plan, and since we're a member of SCRED and kind of help with their building, we need to approve, each of the school districts part of SCRED need to approve this as their part of SCRED. They don't have near the kind of planning that we need to have. You can see they have a lot of zeros in their category. They are building fund balance to help with their building and with the vision building specifically, which is the vision buildings where we have our special ed federal setting 4 program. I know they're working on building funds to help with that parking lot so we can pave that parking lot. But that's kind of where those numbers, as you get down into category 5, are coming, is that they're working on making sure they keep their building up and the vision building as well. And they get the same kind of revenue. It won't be fully decided until we get to levy season in December, what exactly, how it will impact taxpayers, but you can kind of see their plans as they're building their 10-year LTFM plan.
Does anybody have any questions regarding SCRED's LTFM plan? If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve it.
I'll move that. I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next up is Minnesota State High School League resolution for membership.
Recommend a reapproval of staying with the Minnesota State High School League for our membership for our sports and fine arts events. I have filled out my part. Dave will need to fill out his part after the board approves, but recommending reapproval of this to keep our activities and events under the Minnesota State High School League.
Does anybody have any questions regarding the Minnesota State High School League resolution? If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve the resolution.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next up are some changes to our support staff handbook.
Yeah, at the May meeting, the board had asked me to come through with a column for our pool and water safety instructors. So you can see, I just took the pay range out of the support staff agreement, and I made it, it's the very first column you can see is pool and WSI. And what I did to build that was took the same kind of percentage or column one was making from first year to the second year to the third year and factored that in. And then after I developed the 24-25, then gave the 3.25%, just like every other position got for the 25-26 school year. So just made a pay range. We had past practice, everyone, no matter how many years of experience, came in at either next year would have been 1404, and just felt, some of these people have worked with the district for many years. They should see kind of that next step, just like our other support staff positions.
Does anybody have any questions regarding the changes to the support staff handbook? I'm looking for a motion to approve.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Next up is superintendent's evaluation. You have all received the superintendent's evaluation. Thank you to those that have filled it out. I would like it back by June 26th. I believe that's the last Wednesday of the month. And then we will go into closed session in July. And go from there. Does anybody have any questions regarding it? All right, and we're gonna keep moving on to our first read of policy 704.
This policy is coming as a recommendation from our auditors. They just thought we should have a policy on our fixed assets. So I pulled it, we didn't have this before, so this is pulled from MSBA as a first read. But again, this is not a state required policy, but it is something our auditors recommended when we went through the last audit. So that's why that's coming up to you guys.
Does anybody have any questions regarding the policy development and maintenance of an inventory of fixed assets and fixed asset accounting system? If not, then we'll see it next month. Next up is pickleball.
We have a community member in Finlayson who has been working, they had reached out, if you remember back a few months ago, the board received some communication about adding pickleball lines up here on our tennis courts. And there's a community member here in Finlayson who was working with myself after that, and the Finlayson Lions Club. The Finlayson Lions Club has agreed to reimburse this individual for $500 to update the tennis courts with nets and lines. But since we own that, we need to give approval to do that. So looking for board approval to do some updates to our tennis courts out here to provide nets and lines for pickleball. It wouldn't cost the district anything. The Lions Club is going to reimburse this individual, but they need the board's blessing to do that.
Can they still be used for tennis as well? Okay.
Yep.
Does anybody have any other questions regarding the pickleball courts at Finlayson? If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next up is the proposed 24-25 district budget.
So the first part I'll start, which we talked about a little bit, just because it will hopefully positively impact next year. But as I said earlier in the meeting, our expenditures this year we're doing well. We're still about a little bit over $2 million under prediction. There are some expenses coming up here in the next 2 weeks yet, but I'm really hopeful as we conclude this year that we will finish the year under what we budgeted for, which will then go into our fund balance and help be able to have offset some future costs. So I feel the school district's done a good job up to this point with our spending, especially with a difficult year of enrollment, and we've still stayed within what we budgeted for, or what we reapproved our budget for this past February. we are continually watching revenue. I know back in February, we talked for this school year, really watching the sped revenue. And if you remember back in February, I wasn't 100% confident we were gonna get that additional 200,000. I was confident, but we are gonna get that additional $200,000 in sped revenue that we had talked about back in February. So that's what's really helping our budget, is we got more special ed revenue than we had predicted at the beginning of the year. As stated at the beginning of the meeting, to meet our policy 701, our revenue projection needs to match our projected expenditures or be above our projected expenditures. So the changes I made today was reducing staff to make sure that the proposed budget would do that. So today reduced, like I said at the beginning of the meeting, 2 additional teachers and 1 special ed teacher, and then reducing 3 support staff positions is what helped me get to a projected revenue above our expenditures. I also put in all of our revenue that I hadn't put in, so all of our projected revenue is built in to this budget to kind of make sure those costs reflect each other appropriately. So like I said, I think we talked about still looking at special ed revenue and some of our interest revenue that's built in. I also built in to what our current student enrollment is. So our current student enrollment is 904. That's factored in for the revenue. I factored in all those additional kids as elementary students, as we don't know I didn't know for sure in the late game exactly where they fall, secondary or high school. So I just went with the cheaper number. So I factored them all in as elementary kids, knowing that some of those 20 kids could very well be secondary kids, and bringing in some additional revenue from the state. So after doing that, and I'll go through some more revenue and expenses as I go, but as of the beginning of this, with the projected budget, what it would be doing is we would have about $4,341,259 a year from now, projected fund balance. Our fund balance policy is that we would strive to have 25%. To have 25% of this budget, we would have to have $3,786,671. So this budget would have a cushion as far as our fund balance policy of about $554,000, $588. The projected fund balance without any additions with the proposed budget, projected fund balance is at 28.6% a year from now. Some things that are affecting the revenue or revenue assumptions this year: the state increased funding by 2%. The budget for the state is on 2 years, second year of their state budget, so we will be receiving 2% on the student aid part of the budget. We also, which we've talked quite a bit about, we will have, once June is completed, all of our COVID and ESSER dollars have expired, so we will not have any more of those. Like I said, the revenue, well, when I typed this, we had initially built the revenue for 885 kids, but I did change that today to the 904 students that we currently have. Where our revenue has increased is in general education aid, compensatory, capital. Indian education has some additional money. We still are receiving additional money that the state gave last year for library aid and aid that we will use for our second school psychologist. We just talked about long-term facilities revenue, hoping to use that to help with our facilities like we've talked about. Eventually, we do need a new gym in the high school cafeteria, and we've seen more revenue for special ed. Last year, the state came through, if you remember, with special ed funding with 44% increase. We will see that same increase for this upcoming school year. Some of the areas where our revenue decreased, we are still seeing decreases in our federal sources. We no longer qualify for impact aid. In the past, this had been roughly $100,000. Some years we saw more, but average right around $100,000. We got a little bit less than historic for Pathways 2. We still received Pathways 2. It was a little bit lower. And then the biggest thing impacting our enrollment is what happens with our revenue. This year being 50 kids less than what we had started is the biggest part that's impacting our revenue going forward. And whenever the enrollment changes, that impacts every single area of state funding. Our enrollment is kind of what tips those numbers. They put it into a formula for each of these categories, and it's kind of based off your student enrollment. So when our enrollment goes down, it kind of impacts every single area of our budget. Prior to this morning, some areas that we did reduce in the high school level, we had reduced some fixed assignments. The board had talked back in April and May about adding some of those electives back in. We did do that. We didn't add them all back in, but we did add back in some electives. We reduced our behavior interventionist. The district counselor that was used at all 3 buildings was reduced. We are using some of those state funds towards the school psychologist as our special ed numbers have gone up, and we have quite a need in special ed. And the high school also reduced a science teacher in this budget. The Empower ELC staffing will be the same. We will have 2 teachers, and class sizes are currently very similar. Now with today's changes of staffing, class sizes may go up a little bit than what we saw this year, but we strive to be right around that 30 or under number at the high school level. Elementary programs, we do have a little bit of decrease in spending. If you remember going into this school year, we had tried to hire a math teacher at the elementary school that we were not able to do all year. We are able to do that for next year, so we left the math teacher in there. But with we did reduce 1 staff and then had a lot of internal shifts to meet the class sizes and kind of where the enrollments are. So the elementary doesn't have as much cuts at their level, but they have a lot of internal shifts to match class sizes and where the enrollment is at the elementary level. Both Finlayson and Hinckley Elementary will have BPK 5 days a week. Class sizes will be very similar to this year. With the new addition of staff member being cut, class sizes may go up a little bit, but should still be pretty comparable to this school year. Our transportation budget is stable. If you remember back when we approved the capital budget a few months ago, we are slated to get 1 more Type 3 vehicle this summer. Otherwise, the rest of the transportation is pretty similar to this year's budget, or even a little bit slightly reduced. Staff development is part of the budget. We are required to spend 2% of our general fund on staff development, and we have some trainings that are either already coming up. Mrs. Scullard talked about some with the Bridges math curriculum, and we have some things that will come up during workshop week regarding behavior that will also continue through the school year. So that was one of our focuses, was to get some more behavior support for the teachers, as we've seen some increases in behaviors across the district. We just talked about food prices. They went up a little bit, not nearly as high as what we saw last year, but we have seen food prices go up, especially our bakery. We did make some reductions out of our kitchen staff to help with that. And like we just learned, most of our commodity bids were pretty close to last year with a little bit of a decrease in milk. And then our athletic budget is very stable compared to last year. Last year, if you remember, I did have to cut a few jersey requests. We are able to get those jerseys going in the next school year. So I know the 2 teams that will benefit from that are happy about that. And then the other parts that are impacting the budget, we just completed teacher and support staff negotiations, and those new salaries and benefits are built into the budget. Next year, we will have a few managers to negotiate with, but our next big negotiation year will be in the 25-26 school year. Teachers will be in the 2nd year of their new agreement and have a 3.25% increase. Support staff will be in the 1st year, and they have a 4% salary increase built in, which was the same the teachers got in their 1st year. The board in July will talk about substitute rates as well as our fees that we charge for athletics, computers, and technology. So we could look at possibly increasing some revenue if we change our fees, but we will talk about subs and all our fees at our July school board meeting. And then mileage assumptions built in. Capital budget we already approved, and I didn't update this last line. The budget is built, this current budget is built to have a 28.6% fund balance. I will change that right now. Questions? That was a lot of Mr. Masterson talking. Are there questions?
So this budget also included levies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And how much, I meant to look at taxes before I came, How much were the levies at? So did we max out the levies this year?
We maxed our levies, which if I remember correctly, was about an additional 110,000, if I remember correctly. I don't remember that number, but it was roughly 100,000, a little bit more, I think, from last year's.
So then we pretty much be looking at the same thing for next year too. Right?
Yes. And then the second link is just how the budget is broke down by each category that we have in the district. I did take one question on this today towards the bottom under athletics, where we have for boys and girls athletics, and then a category for boys athletics, and then another category for girls. The boys, girls are the events that we have both the boys and girls participating in, like cross country and track. So that's why that's broken out differently, where they're both together in the same activity. Otherwise, I'm looking for approval of the proposed budget.
So the budget that you sent out, that's based on current enrollment numbers.
Correct.
What happens if those go down? How do
Then
we
it'd be-
adjust for that?
It'd be a similar situation like this year, where the board could choose to use our fund balance to offset that, or if we need, what our policy has been for fund balance is if we get down to 15%, then we have to do cuts. But the board would have discussion if we wanted to look at making cuts in the year. It's not as easy to do, especially when you have, the teachers in place or staff in place. Like this year, we just used our fund balance and our revenue ended up compensating for that. This year, what helped compensate for that, we weren't able to hire every position. Hopefully we're able to hire every position next year that we need, but that would be something we would have to look at. Because if enrollment did dip.
And in the past, fund balance has really not been used, right?
It's been used when we've been over 25%. I think a couple of years ago, we added a third counselor. So it's been used when we've come in with fund balance over 25%, when there's some cushion in the budget. So it has, some years it has, some years it hasn't.
And to make it go down a percentage, you had mentioned a while back, like how much, in order for it to go down a percentage. So if we were to go down to 24%, about how much revenue is that?
Roughly, it's about, I did some math, 'cause I thought I might get that question, I'm trying to find post-it note or it's about, if you wanted to go that low, it's about 300 to 360,000.
Okay.
For 1%.
So to go to down
To 24, but even
from the
if, so if
28.
it's
So that number brings it from 28% to 24. 1%'s 150
yeah.
to 170,000.
Does anybody have any other questions? If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve the proposed district budget.
I'll move that.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next on the agenda is rehiring of staff with fund balance funds. The reason why I wanted to put this back on there is because I remember back at our April work session meeting, we had talked about roughly the $1 million we needed to cut, and that we were gonna do a 2-year plan, and not try to do it all in one cycle, 1 year cycle. I don't feel if we cut these 6 positions that anybody will be wanting to come to Hinckley-Finlayson district. I don't think it's gonna help with our staff morale, and I certainly don't think it's gonna help with student achievement. I don't think that we should be padding our fund balance in a year, that we're having. And I would also like to, consider looking at adding a behavior interventionist back into our budget. Because I don't know if you guys looked at our exit interviews from Friday, but every single one of them brought up behavior and discipline. And I do not think that, it's going away. So I am recommending rehiring of the 1 sped teacher, the 2 gen ed teachers, the 3 support staff, and a behavior intervention for 24-25. And if I understand correctly, then even adding the behavior interventionist, our fund balance will be roughly what, Brian, 23.8? Is that what you told me?
Well, now all the revenue's built in, so those 6, when I had initially proposed the budget without all the revenue in, those 6 positions would have put the fund balance at 24%. Now I've built in all the revenue, so it'd be a little higher than that. Let me do some quick math. I have to. With the behavior interventionist. If you put all 7 in, with all the revenue in there, our fund balance would be about 25.6%.
So we're still over
We'd still be over 25%.
With adding back those 6 and the behavior intervention.
But remember what I also added back in was those 20 kids that I hadn't been planning at the beginning of the year, which is roughly $150,000.
So 20 kids is 1.
I used the 20 kids, I used into.
So that's 1% of our fund balance, because you just said that it was roughly about 150 for a percent.
So if there are decreases in enrollments,
We
and
still have.
it would still maybe be at 25, maybe 24 for the fund balance. And so what was the estimated total on those 7 positions?
366,400.
That's with that okay.
Yep.
So my motion is there. I would like to add the 7 positions. I'm looking for a second. Does anybody have any further discussion? Janelle, I'll wait.
Oh, I was just doing.
If you want me to wait, I'll wait. I didn't see you.
I will just agree that I think that adding back those positions, including the behavior intervention, is in our best interest.
And Brian, you have no major objections to this, do you?
No.
Okay. Assume he's a principal then?
So there's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next up is adjourn. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second? There's a motion and a second. Does anybody want to discuss? Not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?